Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Ignition Time. My name is Dr. Nitin Chhoda, and welcome to our channel. This channel, the Ignition Time channel, is about the country, the economy, as well as our money. I appreciate you being a viewer and a subscriber. Now, by the way, if you're not a subscriber, please take a moment, just one moment, to click the subscribe button and enable notifications. So, where are all the jobs? Everyone talks about all these jobs. Well, folks, here's a new article from CNBC. Here's where the jobs are in one chart. So what's going on, folks? The United States added over 450,000 jobs in January of this year. There was strong demand for workers at restaurants, at retailers, at mail and parcel delivery companies. So a lot of people getting employed at Amazon. The leisure and the hospitality sector, which by the way was severely impacted by COVID, added more than 150,000 jobs in the first month of 2022. In fact, retail had a lot of job gains in January as employers added 61,400 individuals to the workforce. And this was the industry's second best statistics over the past 12 months. In other words, basically, retail was getting back on track. Now, workers who picked up and deliver packages and mail saw their employment pop by 21,200 in the past 30 days, while warehousing and storage facilities added 13,400 jobs. Let's take a look at this chart on your screen, and this is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. This is the 1 month net change in January jobs. You'll see that leisure and hospitality added 151,000 new jobs. Professional and business services, 86,000 new jobs. Retail trade, 61,400. Transportation and warehousing, 54,000 jobs. It seems that more people started to work at the government, 23,000 jobs, and so on as we go down this list. Now, what's really interesting is that despite a surge in Omicron in the month of January, employers across the country added over 450,000 jobs in January because there was a lot of hiring at restaurants and bars, retailers, and mail and parcel delivery workers. In fact, the leisure and the hospitality sector, which again, like I mentioned, was severely impacted by the pandemic, added more than 150,000 jobs, like you saw earlier on that image. Now, here's what's interesting. I've been doing videos since the start of the pandemic, and I've always pointed out the plight of the leisure and hospitality sector. In fact, individuals in travel, leisure, entertainment, and hospitality were the hardest hit as a result of the pandemic, and through no fault of their own, they were the ones who were the most dependent on stimulus checks and unemployment benefits, because individuals who do not have a high school diploma, individuals who are primarily African American, primarily Hispanic, were largely dependent on jobs. And these are statistics. This isn't my personal opinion. These are actual statistics from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They were actually dependent on the leisure and hospitality sector. So what is happening now is, fortunately, everyone's getting back to work gradually, and I believe that this is good news. But what's interesting is that some sectors have had their jobs and essentially the number of employed people recover much faster than others. In fact, finally, we're starting to see people starting to go back to work at restaurants, hotels, casinos, and theme parks. So let's go back to that earlier graph for a second. Leisure and hospitality added an average of 196,000 jobs each month over the past 12 months, well ahead of any other industry as it rebounds from the pandemic. Now, thanks to the widespread business closures in 2020, unfortunately, this sector, the leisure and hospitality sector, is still short by 1.8 million jobs. That's 10% of all jobs in that sector compared to where employment stood in February 2020. In fact, I believe the Great Resignation, and by the way, I've done other videos on the Great Resignation, is partially a result of individuals quitting the leisure and hospitality industry. We're talking about individuals who worked in leisure and hospitality, who worked in restaurants, malls, theaters, shopping centers, malls, essentially saying, hey, I don't want to do that job anymore. I'm quitting and I'm moving on to something else. So speaking of leisure and hospitality, restaurants and bars added 108,000 jobs, and accommodation, hotels added just over 22,000, and amusement, gambling, and recreation venues added 20,000 jobs. So I guess people are going to hotels now and people are starting to gamble again. According to a quote from Cliff Hodge, who's the Chief Investment Officer for Cornerstone Wealth, he said this: "The jobs report blew away expectations across the board. The headline number of 467,000 was multiples above expectations. Wages came in hot, and most importantly, the labor force participation rate rose, all during a period where Omicron cases spiked." In fact, folks, the US economy added 7,500 truckers in January 2022, which is the third best month of the last 12 for truckers, because at the end of the day, we as a country, we need those truckers to get our packages delivered for supply chain relief. Really interesting stuff. In fact, the US Labor Department said this in a press release. In January, Job gains occurred in couriers and messengers, 21,000 more jobs. Warehousing and storage, 13,000 new jobs. Truck transportation, 8,000 new jobs, and air transportation, 7,000 new jobs. The Labor Department goes on to say, all four of these component industries have surpassed their February 2020 employment levels, with particularly strong growth in warehousing and storage, 410,000 additional, and couriers and messengers, 236,000 additional jobs. Now, many economists say that they were happy to see the labor force participation rate and the employment to population ratio climb in January. The bottom line is more and more people are getting back to work. In fact, and this is super interesting, the US Labor Department said that the increase in the number of people getting back to work, they call that the labor force participation rate, was thanks to a bump in the size of the population in age groups that participate in the labor force at high rates. In other words, essentially individuals in their 20s, 30s and 40s who tend to participate, who tend to essentially work much more than individuals who are in their 50s, 60s and 70s. They essentially got back to work in large numbers. Now, on top of that, the average hourly earnings actually rose 0.73% month over month, which is the fastest increase since December of 2020. In fact, average hourly earnings were up almost 6% compared to where they were in January 2021, which again is the hottest annual pace since spring of 2020. What does all of this mean, folks? It means that the American economy is getting back on track. And I gave you an overview and outline of where all the jobs are. I think your main takeaway should be that everything is getting back to normal. And if you're one of those millions of individuals who've actually quit your job, I think you now have a golden opportunity to re-engineer your skills, to learn something new, to essentially go back to work, maybe even start your own business and make more money than ever before. I believe we as Americans are hardworking, and I believe we as Americans are very creative, very intelligent, and I believe that our creativity can lead the way not just for ourselves, our families, but also our local communities, and by extension, and I know this because I've traveled internationally, I was actually born overseas in India. By extension, I think we as Americans motivate the rest of the world. My goal is to motivate you and to help you live the American dream. This right here is a little bit of information about me. You learn more about who I am, what my journey has been like, and why you should listen to me. Please take a moment to click the like button, click subscribe, and enable notifications. Thank you so much for watching. I want you to know I appreciate you. I work hard on this channel every single day, and I'll continue to do that. Thank you so much. Please click the like button. Please click subscribe. Please enable notifications. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Ignition Time. Take care. Bye.